What if I told you that the absurd chaos of Chainsaw Man can basically be summed up in one word? You might look at all the blood and devils and tell me it's violence, but that's not really it. You might also look at all the killer waifus and tell me it's something like romance or sexuality. In fact, you probably watched a video titled The Point of Chainsaw Man and are convinced that it's something along the lines of control. Well, all of those are really close, but on their own they don't capture the whole picture of Chainsaw Man. So in this video, I'm going to take a look at Chainsaw Man's three main characters and explain how they each offer a different lesson regarding this main theme. Be warned that this will contain spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on Chainsaw Man. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to Manga Merchant for sharing his thoughts on Abara from Dr. Stone. If you'd like more Chainsaw Man and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Okay, so at this point it's about time I told you what that one theme is. Well, at first I actually thought it was sexuality, because, let's be honest, a ton of the story following Denji revolves around his quest for boobs. But while sexuality and Denji's growth as a result of it are a major element of the story, there's still a lot more that it doesn't capture. The broader theme that pretty much covers everything in the story is what I tend to refer to as relationships. You might also refer to this as sociality or social connections, but a better way to think of it is meaning derived from relationships. Because when you look at the world of Chainsaw Man, right, everything seems to be connected. In the world of Chainsaw Man, devils get their entire existence from the fears of mankind. In other words, they would not exist but for this relationship between humans and how they perceive their fears. They quite literally give the devils their meaning, which is why, as Kishibe loves to tell us, the devils fear humans with a few bolts loose. If you don't fear them, then that threatens their entire existence. So, in a world like this, where meaning is derived from relationships, you would think the majority of the relationships in Chainsaw Man are meaningful. And actually, before I address that, let me just be clear about what I, mean when I say meaning. There's two ways to understand it, at least for the purposes of this video. There's meaning, as in your reason for existing in the universe, and then there's also subjective meaning that you assign to the world around you. The food you eat, the clothes you wear, even the people you hang out with. It's the kind of thing philosophers, or people that like to call themselves philosophers, love debating while drinking expensive wine and listening to experimental music. But trust me, I'm going to avoid getting any more meta than I already have. Now, like I was saying, you would think the majority of relationships in Chainsaw Man would be meaningful, as in they give the people involved a sense of purpose or satisfaction. But most of the time they're pretty shallow. Instead of close, personal relationships that fulfill the people involved, the characters really just tend to use each other. Kobeni is used by her family, the Soviets use Reze as a soldier, and the government of Japan uses its public devil hunters as dogs waiting for their commands. All of the characters are in some kind of relationship with another, but those relationships only serve as a means to an end. The most common example of this is the contracts. The contract is an important convention of the series that gives everyone involved exactly what they ask for, but it's done at arm's length, and doesn't form any bonds beyond the mutual obligations of the agreement. So it's obvious that relationships are a fundamental building block of the world of Chainsaw Man. But what's not so obvious is how they can provide true meaning. The kind of meaning that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and reminds you that your life matters. Well, into this world of shallow relationships enters Denji. More importantly, Denji after he's given a devil heart from Pochita. It's this relationship between Denji and Pochita that sets the events of Chainsaw Man into motion, and ultimately serves as Fujimoto's answer to this dilemma regarding relationships and meaning. But before we can start looking for melons and understand what Fujimoto is trying to say towards the end of the story, we need to look at the characters that guide us toward that answer. So let's start with my personal favorite character, Power. There's this alleged interview, and I say alleged because everyone seems to know about it, yet somehow I couldn't find the actual source. Anyway, there's this alleged interview where Fujimoto says Power was inspired by Eric Cartman, and whether you believe this or not, the resemblance is uncanny. They're both racist, spoiled liars who like fried chicken and love to keep cats as pets. But more importantly, they're both self-centered. Much like Cartman, Power thinks the world revolves around her, and lives as if the world really does revolve around her. She lies because it's convenient to her. She's racist because she only views people based on her own biases. She's spoiled because she thinks everything belongs to her. She eats fried chicken because, okay, that has nothing to do with it, but fried chicken's just really good. Point being, we know she's self-centered because it's exactly how she starts out. Power was a hermit, someone completely isolated from the rest of the world. The only relationship in her life was between her and her food, or the animals she viewed as her food. She even says that all lives are trivial. So, in the context of our discussion about relationships, Power is an example of someone completely void of any social interaction whatsoever, at least until she meets her pet cat Meowie. It's when she starts taking care of a life besides her own that Power learns that, quote, blood is nice and warm. Here, blood is the meaning Power finds in others. She notices the taste and smell of blood in beings she hunts for food, but notices how warm it is when she has a cat she can cuddle and find comfort in. Then comes Denji, who saves Power from the gross bat devil and helps take this lesson one step further. Power is saved by Denji, and from there on they start to become close friends, eating the food the other one doesn't want and sharing a single brain cell together. And while Power is aware of this, it's only after the encounter with the Darkness Devil that she truly understands this lesson. Due to her trauma, Power needs Aki and Denji to do everything for her. She sees that Denji gave up what he wanted to do in order to take care of Power and assumes he hates her. But Denji tells her that he doesn't hate her, which is true. He just cares more about being there for his friend. It's after this scene that we see how Power's worldview has changed. When she saves Denji from Makima, we get another quick flashback. This time, she adds that her life is also trivial, but that she can't let Denji die. So with Power, we learn that relationships are inevitable. You can try and live your life in isolation like some hermit, but there's no running away from our nature as social creatures. It's this nature and our tendency to find meaning in relationships with others that makes living on your own just incomplete. Now, as I'm sure you're well aware, it's still possible to live in a social world and be surrounded by people, and yet still not have any meaningful relationships. And this is something addressed in the character arc of Chainsaw Man's take on the edgelord, Aki. It's no coincidence that the first mention of Aesop's The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse is in the backstory of Aki. It's a very subtle analogy that is admittedly open to interpretation, but here's where the fable seems to be pointing. In the context of relationships, the country mouse is someone who lives in bad faith. If you aren't already aware, living in bad faith is the existentialist idea that means you basically ignore the responsibility of a free life in exchange for a persona handed to you by some outside force. And this idea becomes easier to understand when you see how Aki finds meaning in the world. With the loss of his family and any connections that came with it, Aki is left empty. So he decides to give his new life meaning by devoting himself to revenge. This is such a clear example of bad faith of the country mouse, because it's obvious that Aki is using this revenge persona as a crutch. Denji notices it right away, and even one of the devil hunters tells Aki that he's like a cutout copy of a manga protagonist. Although, to be fair, this isn't Aki's entire identity. He's still the same child that watched his family die in a matter of seconds. Himeno tells us that Aki still cries over the death of teammates, and in fact cried over the death of Himeno, which is incredibly ironic considering she tried to tell him so many times that she wanted to run away with him, and he just wouldn't hear it. And that's because living a simple life with a girl he likes doesn't have any place in his scripted role as the angsty revenge seeker. The problem with Aki is that he never actually matured from the child who watched his family die. He just did the first thing most people would and looked for revenge. And that's why Kishibe calls him sane and why Himeno forces him into cigarettes. Because Aki is sane by conventional standards, he follows the common sense path. He defines his life based on this goal of revenge rather than what he actually wants. So by the time Aki realizes he has a deep, meaningful connection with his newfound family of Denji, his little brother, and Power, his little sister, it's too late. In the end of his dreamlike snowball fight as the gun fiend, Aki's brother reminds him that he never even wanted to have a snowball fight, he literally just wanted to play catch. The snowball fight is the perfect metaphor for Aki's avoidance of responsibility because he just leans into what's convenient, ignoring the meaning in his life he gets from friends and family that are right in front of him. So as the country mouse, Aki's character warns us of the dangers of bad faith. While living in society is part of our nature, it's important to make our own decisions and be conscious of our own standards, rather than the standards of others. Otherwise, as we saw with Aki, you become the perfect pet for someone like Makima. So now, at this point, with an understanding of what happened to Power and Aki, we can finally start to look at the relationship between Denji and Pochita. Denji is a lot like Aki in the sense that he falls into the country mouse trap. He starts out with a perfectly good friend in Pochita, but because he has no idea of what happiness is supposed to be like, he dreams of what it might look like. Then when Denji loses his only friend, he makes the same mistake as Aki. Denji is left to decide what he wants in life, to make the meaning in his life, but allows Makima to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. See, one of the biggest misconceptions in Chainsaw Man is that what Makima did to Denji was a one-sided deal, that she did all the manipulating. But Denji is just as guilty. He didn't flex on the entire planet or doom anyone to an ironic twist of fate, but he used Makima just as much as she used him. Pochita tells Denji to show him his dreams, and what does he do? Well, first he goes on a quest for boobs, but realizes afterwards how meaningless it was. It's at this point that Makima knows why Denji doesn't find meaning in shallow connections, but uses the answer to his problems to manipulate Denji into doing what she wants. But it's not like Makima was literally mind-controlling Denji. He could have thought about what Makima was doing, but instead he just goes along with it. He lets Makima tell him what he wants with her spin on it. Just like the contracts of Chainsaw Man, Denji looks for meaning in other people and gets exactly what he asked for, but not what he really wants. As much as his relationship with Reze was probably healthy for him, it was doomed to fail. Not because they were bad for each other, in fact they were probably a perfect couple. The problem is that Denji went into it looking to be given happiness by Reze. He thought being with Reze would make him happy, which, again, it probably would, but not because the relationship would suddenly fill him with a sense of purpose. I've already mentioned bad faith, but I didn't mention Jean-Paul Sartre, the guy who coined the term. Also, sorry to any French speakers, but I'm going to be butchering that name a lot in this video. In his play No Exit, in which three people are seemingly trapped in the same room, Sartre writes that hell is other people, meaning we cannot avoid the meaning assigned to us by other people or even society at large. In Chainsaw Man, the idea is a bit more literal, considering the devils get their entire reason for being from other people. The danger of this is that it leads to the country mouse trap, in which we avoid the responsibility of freedom and allow others to dictate who we are. And this is exactly what Denji does in his pursuit of his so-called normal life. He runs from the door, hiding his regrets, and tells Makima he wants to be her dog, only for Makima to give him just that. She throws every mistake Denji's ever made in his face, and again, gives her spin on it before Denji can decide what it really means. So, at this point, the whole hell is other people thing seems pretty gloomy, right? Well, luckily, Sartre would later comment on his play and add that sure, hell is other people, but heaven is each other, caring about your fellow beings. See, Denji viewed being a country mouse as paradise, but paradise by definition is unrealistic, which is why the death of that paradise is brilliantly signaled by this painting for John Milton's Paradise Lost. And Fujimoto really brings this home when Kobeni claims that the only kind of life free of bad things is in your dreams. This is when Denji finally realizes the trap that is the country mouse. He realizes that you can only ever be the town mouse, someone who is honest with themselves about their desires to eat steak dinners and meet lots of girls, which on its face is just as shallow, but here Denji is actually listening to what he wants and being honest about it, instead of just doing what he thinks he wants because someone told him to. And it's only after Denji can finally be honest with himself that he can actually enter into a meaningful social connection. He's given Nayuta to look after as the new control devil, but this time he isn't in it to make himself happy or find meaning. By this point, he already knows who he is and what he wants. As Pochita tells him, Denji is just there to take care of Nayuta and help her fulfill her dream. Or at least the control devil, but you know what I mean. Which is exactly what Sartor means when he says heaven is each other, and is ultimately what readers can take away from the story. By following the three main characters of Chainsaw Man, we learn the trap of looking for meaning in others. You can try to avoid others and their overwhelming gaze, but it goes against our social nature. At the same time, we need to be careful not to let other people define who we are. It's only after accepting the responsibility of our freedom that we can start to listen to others and find real happiness in relationships. And that's it for this discussion. Hopefully this video helped you understand the awesomeness that is Chainsaw Man just a bit more. If it did, then please let me know by leaving a like. Of course, there's no way I could have covered everything in this one video, so let me know what I missed in the comments. And if you'd like more Chainsaw Man and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.